Hello and welcome. I'm glad you could be with me. We're back in the studio after a break, so it feels kind of like new beginnings here tonight. I'm with two people who are from an organization that I am really, I think the word is in awe of. They're from the Nonviolent Peaceforce organization, and it's a wonderful organization. You may have caught an interview or two, I've actually done two, with one of the co-founders, a man named Mel Duncan. And Mel has retired, as I understand it, but with us tonight is the director, Marna Anderson, and one of the newer staff members, Will Wallace, and he is a man who has been a mentor to a lot of the young people working with you now. So we're going to find out more about what they both do. But if you're not familiar with the organization, I want to just turn to you first, Marna, and ask you a bit about history, when it was formed, the countries you go to, because they go to hot spots, really hot spots. Yeah. So tell us more about the early days. And
well, thank you for having Will and me here today. Nonviolent Peaceforce was started by David Hartsough, who is a generational Quaker, lives in the Bay Area, a lifetime activist, and Mel Duncan, who is from the Twin Cities, which is why we have an office here. And the two of them met each other at in 1998 at The Hague as a international conference for peace, and they came with the same idea, not knowing that they had the same idea, and they met and had this idea of what Gandhi had referred to as the Shanti Sena, which is a peace army. What if we formed peace armies of people that refused to participate in war? And so that was the initial idea. And the genesis, the organization really wanted to be an international organization rather than an organization that was in the United States that worked internationally. And so our first convening was of about 75 different people from organizations all over the world that they had a convening in India. The second one is Mexico. And together those folks decided and talked about where could we test this out, what this theory of unarmed civilian protection.
And unarmed is an
unarmed
important
civilian
word,
protection,
isn't
yeah.
it?
The idea is that we could protect civilians better without weapons and without force and without threat of force. And so our first project was in 2002 in Sri Lanka. Our largest program now is in South Sudan and the Philippines. We're in Myanmar, Ukraine, Iraq, Indonesia we just started, and Sudan, and then the United States. And together we have about 500 people around the world who are committed to nonviolence and committed to protecting civilians through unarmed strategies.
And the 500 people, some of them are paid staff, obviously, and then many, 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 proportionately probably 80% are actual volunteers.
No, actually, they're all paid.
Are they paid?
Yes, one of the things that we felt was really important.
I didn't ever get that.
Yeah, one of the things we felt that was important was that working for peace should be a vocation and a goal.
I like
and
that.
So we have a lot of people. We have to be 25 really to be in the field, and particularly in some of the really hot spots, which is really pretty young, but the training is quite extensive, and it's really, again, it's really rooted in the values of nonviolence, nonpartisanship, which means we don't take sides in conflicts. Doesn't mean we're neutral. We stand on the side of human rights and humanitarian law, which is what grounds us, and relationship building, and also a citizen-to-citizen action. So working alongside, everywhere we work in collaboration with community organizations and leaders in those communities, because they know best how to create the capacity for peace.
So you're coming in, or your people are coming in as strangers when they first arrive, and so they need to listen and hear from the leaders, I'm sure.
Yeah, we do a lot of talking. Our folks in South Sudan talk a lot about sitting and having cups of sweet tea with people from all different sides of a conflict. We work with all parties to a conflict. And we listen and try to understand their perspective and try to find an opening for peace. So how do we create more space for dialogue? How do we enhance what the community is already doing so that we can lift that up and create lasting peace?
It's a situation here that I have so many questions I want to bring Will in, though. You say that you don't take sides, and yet your values are based on humanitarian values. And your job here now, which is one we haven't talked about at all, is working with the kids and young people in the community of North Minneapolis, right?
Correct.
And how do you define your role if you were sitting next to someone on the bus and they ask what you did? What would you say to answer that question?
I'm a man of peace, and in my community, working with young people, ages 14 to 24, sometimes there's no dad, there's no uncles, and so I play that role. The ultimate goal is about what do safety look like in North Minneapolis. First of all, I have to define what do safety look like for myself and my community. What safety look like is walking to the store, not fearing that there's going to be gunshots.
And you live in North Minneapolis?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And so working with these young people that are in gangs and cliques, how do you bring them to the table to talk about reconciling their difference through de-escalation? A lot of people say that it's not going to happen, but I believe it can happen. I have worked with over 300-some young brothers. To this day, there's only been 2 funerals. And then we do this approach now around unarmed civilian protection. And they're like, what is that? You know, it's like, well, we don't talk about unarmed civilian protection in our community. We say stop the violence. But when you give these young people a sense of hope, a sense of belonging, and then demand them, or not demand, but just say, I challenge you to go into the community and you define what do public safety look like in North Minneapolis. And then we teach these young people to go into these other youth organizations to begin to talk that language to their peers about what do de-escalation look like. You know, we see it in our home all the time when family members get into it, but we don't know it's de-escalation. But when you begin to talk that language, now they're like, oh, I have a language, I have a word to say. So it's important to me to really live the dream of Gandhi, Martin Luther King. It was all about nonviolence, and we need to really stop this cycle of violence. And so we're using an unarmed civilian approach to teach young people to try to stop the cycles of violence.
And you're voicing, I think, what everybody, no matter where you live in the Twin Cities, would agree. We want to stop the violence and stop fear and get things back. And I don't even know how far back we have to go to say when were things the way we really wanted. I mean, we can always be better. But the last, what would you say, the last 10 years maybe things have gotten kind of gradually worse? Or would you say we're just getting more media attention?
Well, I think that it comes in waves, depending on a lot of factors. We talk about negative peace and positive peace. Negative peace is maybe just the absence of violence. Positive peace is when you have the resources that everybody needs to live in peace, to what Will talks about, being able to walk to the store without being shot or being threatened. That's one thing, but being able to afford to go to the store, being able to have dignified housing, to have schools where your children are going to be able to learn what they need to learn to be positive and productive community members, that's the positive piece. And so that's also really what we're looking at. How do we create, when we talk to community members about what does a peaceful community look like to you, they draw pictures of clinics, they draw pictures of schools, playgrounds,
Parks.
bus shelters where they can stand safely, parks. That's the kind of world we want to be creating.
So you're looking both, in both of your roles, looking both at very specific kinds of things in terms of guns and violence and fighting, and then looking at the broader goals too of better housing and just all kinds of broad goals.
Yeah, because I think that violence is bred in places where you lack resources, where you lack beauty.
Right.
That's one of the problems. You go up West Broadway along that corridor, and there's a lot of boarded up buildings there. There's a lot of people that don't want to invest in that community. There's people that own those buildings that don't live anywhere near the Minnesota, let alone North Minneapolis. And so that creates a problem. If you don't, Will's talked to me about this before, if kids grow up and they don't see that people really care about the environment in which they're living, how do they have that self-worth and self-value?
Yeah.
And you're mentioning you're being an uncle figure, a father figure, a grandpa figure now even. Things I've read have really said that a lot of kids who get into trouble, probably most of them are from families where the dad isn't around much. Isn't that a correlation kind of statistic?
Well, there's a statistic, but there's also a history behind that too. As mothers back then, we knew that it was a system that kept that dad out of that home, especially when young mothers would ask for but get on welfare. That dad couldn't be in that home, so then it was breaking up that family. And so now it's like, even now you think about Martin Luther King and fighting for justice and education and the condition of our community. Here it is, 2023, and we're still fighting for the same thing, just equal. You can tell where a community is violence because you can tell by the credit score. Mostly everybody in North Minneapolis, the credit score is not 700, 800. You know what the violence, but we as people, we can do this together. But do the power at be really want it to happen? And so we're telling our young people, through all of that, it starts with us as a black family. We got to continue to say, we need to do this to get us out of the condition that we're in. And then that's when we'll begin to see changes, because it's economics. That's what it's about.
Right.
It's about economics.
Mayor Frey really pushes housing as a basic need and goal, and that's very tied into economics, of course, too. But would you agree that housing is one of the broad things we need to really
I would say
improve?
Education. I believe
education,
education is the number one.
Is that the number one in your mind?
On my list. If we can provide a quality education to these schools that we see our kids at, you'll see a difference. I mean, you got kids 18, 19 years old, barely can read. I mean, that's a problem.
They've been passed up.
Just passed through the system. And so it needs to stop if you want a generation to be able to have a quality life. And so we were just, it's a coincidence, we were just at a meeting, me and Mona, and we talked about the brain development at the age of 0 birth to 4 years old. And so in our community, why don't we have a lot of bookstores and libraries and really holding these schools accountable to teach our babies? And so that, I believe that education is the key. And they also, someone once told me that the greatest deterrent to violence is the exposure to beauty. So why North Minneapolis can't be like the suburbs?
North Minneapolis got hit hard by that awful tornado too that didn't help
2008.
anything. Yeah, the big one. I don't think I gave your title when we introduced you, did I?
No.
Do you want to just tell the audience?
Yes, I'm the director of Community Peace Building with Nonviolent Peaceforce.
We should have shared that with you way back. And you're really working with kids who've had troubles with the law themselves quite often, aren't you?
Yes. I believe those are the ones that we
That
really
need-
that needs the help.
Are they receptive when you first approach them? I'm just curious how they would react, because they're probably not expecting to be invited to be part of something like this, are they?
Well, they're always reluctant because, people are curious because of so much is happening, right? Are you the
Right.
police? Are you undercover?
Right.
Why is you doing it? But when you begin to tell the story of where I come from and why I'm really passionate about changing the mindset of them, then they're like, okay, but prove to me that you can really get me out of this condition or this position that I'm in. Well, let me invite you to be a community peace builder. Let me get you to. First of all, it's about pay. It's about. That's why they go to the corner, because they want to get paid. They want to go back and help little mom and little brother and sister. So when we offer them these positions, they like, oh wow, he's for real about that.
And so you can pay them if they go through the training?
Well, right now we have 2 staff that are community peace builders, but we want to build that bench. We want to build it. And so as we continue to build, we're going to get the message out that's saying, yeah, these are the training that we offer, these are the conversations. And as we continue, we will be adding 2 or 3 more. But yes, we got to pay them. Who want to work for free? I tell people all the time, our ancestors had already paved the way. We didn't work for free many a years. So these young people's need, just like anybody else, it's about economics. I want to get paid. I got housing. A lot of kids have been I call it couch hopping. A lot of kids have been in shelters, and like I say, moms is one single parent and dad's not there, so they want to help mom out, whether it's son or daughter. So
Well, pay is a wonderful incentive. I worry about fear when I think about recruiting, that people would be fearful that this sounds like kind of a dangerous venture. Do you run into people saying, boy, I don't want to put myself into a hot spot more than I have already in my life?
Yeah. Well, this work is dangerous. It's not for everyone, right? But if you want to change the condition of your community and your peoples, I fear no man but God. And so when I'm telling them young people, come with me, trust me on this journey that we can do this. So yeah, many of them will say, no, I don't want to do it, But I understand, I respect that. Maybe it's not the season for you to start it yet. But if they look at my record, and I offer them to say, well, this man been doing this 30-something years. I've been consistent in trying to change that. So they will take that journey, and I don't get upset and say, oh no, you need to do it, come. But no, I understand their position and I respect that.
I know when I talked to Mel, I brought up the fear question to Marna, and he said, I'd be kind of suspicious if someone said they weren't fearful.
Yeah.
And that was interesting to hear and made sense to me, because there is sort of a leap of faith, in a sense, you have to take, don't you?
Well, I think we all enter into conflict with fear. I
Yeah.
mean, I feel fearful when I have to talk to a best friend about something that happened that didn't feel good, I mean, that's just like, oh, it's not comfortable, it's not fun, but it's important, and that's the skill. So, as Will mentioned, right now we have, we just got a 3-year grant from the Department of Justice that we're starting on, and that we have trained a number of young brothers and volunteers actually to do street safety during protests and festivals and at the polls. And the young brothers always got paid for that. And we want to expand that. So right now we're really doing a lot of coalition building in North Minneapolis, different organizations. And we've been contacted from folks about ongoing festivals in different cities, Juneteenth events.
In Minnesota?
Well, mostly in the Twin Cities.
Oh, okay.
And then also, there's a lot of challenges on our Metro Transit. Could we have safety officers there that know how to de-escalate situations, that know how to regulate their own emotions? And that's gets to that fear, right? When you feel yourself getting fearful, how do you regulate yourself? Get back into your window of tolerance is what we talk to the young brothers about particularly. That's a skill that you will always have and always use, right? And so we see a lot of potential to grow this program, but as I said, we're really at the planning and the implementation phase at this point.
It's a kind of an adventure in terms of a new venture for
Nonviolent Peaceforce.
Nonprofit. And with the kids, most of them are kids who've been in trouble, right? I mean, I wanted to double check that.
Yes.
Do you feel like they are getting looked at by their peers as people who have sort of jumped ship in a way, or are their friends skeptical about what they're doing, and how does that affect them?
Well, they have. People are always going to question why you're going this route, the right route versus the wrong route, right? There has been numerous of young men in my life that I have worked with have friends who have been murdered to gun violence. And these young men wanted to retaliate with their friends. But the first person they called was, Mr. Will, I want to go do this. And I'm like, no, you're not going to do it.
Oh, that's interesting. They'd call you and just, get your feedback. I mean, right there, that's a victory, isn't it?
Yes, it's a victory.
Yes.
But when you pull up on them, drive where they're at, and they get out their car and they come and just grab you, and you can feel their heartbeat. And you can feel the tears going down your shirt that I know I got him now. Because he wouldn't have called me. He'd have went on and did what he had to do with his friends. But just being that, I call myself a 24/7 dad. When those kids call me at 2, 3 in the morning saying that, my stepdad put me out and this and that, but I show up, So I give a big thanks to my wife for being with me, because there's been many calls at 2, 3 in the morning.
The old country doctor. Huh?
That I had to go rescue these guys. But there is that sense of what my friend's gonna say, and I have to teach them that you don't worry about what your friend's gonna say. You're going the right route.
So how important to get that validation from someone they trust that's in their eyes a model, I'm sure.
Yes.
Did you ever have trouble yourself with the law at all?
Yes.
When you were a young boy?
Yes. I'm a black man in America.
Yeah, it kind of goes with the territory, doesn't it, unfortunately?
Yes.
So, but that gives you, I'm guessing then, also some credibility in terms of you can change.
Yes,
right?
yes. Well, I had, like I mentioned to you earlier, about Bobby Hickman, who was one of my mentors, and Spike Moss and Reverend McAfee's. These are historical guys who have been fighting for justice here in Minnesota. And so just knowing that where I come from, Bob, at that time when I was in 10th, 11th grade, he was talking about conflict resolution through the arts. And so at that moment, even though I was gangbanging and I was getting that teaching then. And so just to transform that into my life and teaching, and like I say, I watched Martin Luther King on TV fighting for justice and education equality. And it's just something that's in me that I want to do for not just my people, but all people.
I heard Martin Luther King in person once, and it was back in 1961. And he said one thing out of about 2 hours that stuck in my head. And I'll just share it real quickly. He said, you don't have to like everybody, but you need to love everybody. And it really made me think, and it really has, been kind of a principle that you know, sometimes one person, one statement can make a big difference. And
Yes.
it sounds like you're making a big difference with some of these kids.
Yes.
Can I add on to that real quickly? Because that's
Yeah.
really the premise of a lot of the work that we do of nonviolence, is recognizing that at the heart of everybody is something good, there is nobody that you can throw away and say they don't have goodness within them. And part of what we do all around the world is how do we get hold of that goodness and grow that, and that's a lot of what we are doing.
On that note, we've got to say goodnight. We're out of time already, but I'm so impressed with what the organization's doing, what you're both doing, what you're telling me now. I'll have to have you back sometime and we can go into more detail, because I know we've skimmed the surface here in terms of what you're all about. So thank you both very much for coming down and starting the conversation. I think that's how we need to view this, as a start. So I've been talking to Marna Anderson and Will Wallace about the Nonviolent Peaceforce and the work that they're doing with the Community Peacemakers Initiative. So thank you for being with us. I really will try to get them back soon and we can have a part 2. Thanks.